I didn't cry when I signed the divorce papers. I smiled, that same smile I wore at our wedding, except this time it meant something entirely different. He thought he'd won, that I'd walk away, broken and bankrupt. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already started building my escape 6 months ago. Every kiss I gave him, every family dinner I sat through, every lie I swallowed, I turned into leverage. When I left, I didn't just leave the marriage, I left a trap. And they walked right into it. For the longest time, I thought I had everything I ever wanted. Nathan was the kind of man women glanced at twice. Tall, poised, charming in the effortless way that made you forget to guard yourself. He was my husband, my supposed partner, and in the early years, I believed the life we were building together was real. Our home in the suburbs had the right kind of kitchen for dinner parties and the kind of silence at night that made you believe you were safe. His mother, Evelyn, and his sister, Claire, were well-mannered and always wore smiles that stretched just a second too long. They'd call me our Samantha, pinch my cheeks like I was a child instead of the woman running a multi-million-dollar skincare company. It wasn't love. I know that now. But back then, I let myself believe their niceties were affection, not assessment. We hosted my 38th birthday in the backyard. String lights hung like constellations above us, and the catering team served everything I used to love before I became lactose intolerant. Nathan raised his glass, toasted to the love of my life, the genius behind our family's success. The guests clapped. Evelyn smiled, her eyes flat. Claire whispered something to her that made them both chuckle behind champagne flutes. I noticed it then. That moment, that fracture in the illusion. It wasn't just that they were laughing. It was the way Evelyn glanced at me afterward like I wasn't supposed to see it. Like I wasn't supposed to hear Claire say, she actually believes she built that company on her own. Still, I smiled. I played my part. After dinner, while guests danced and drank under the canopy of curated joy, I sat beside Nathan, resting my head on his shoulder. His phone buzzed once, then again. He shifted slightly, slipped it into his pocket like it had burned his skin. I didn't ask. I had learned not to. But as I leaned into him, I caught a glimpse, just a flash, of the notification on his lock screen. Delete this before she sees it. That night, I didn't sleep. Nathan left early the next morning, citing some last-minute investor meeting. I stayed in bed long after sunrise, replaying the toast, the laugh, the message. Something inside me started to itch, an old, ignored instinct, waking up after years of being told to sit still and smile. The next day, while organizing my legal files for an upcoming trademark dispute, I found something odd in our joint cloud folder. A scanned copy of a document I didn't recognize, an ownership transfer. The name on the new primary shareholder line was Evelyn T. Caldwell. I froze. The document was dated 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Nathan had asked me to sign routine corporate paperwork during dinner. I was stirring marinara sauce when he slid it across the counter. Just needs your signature, he'd said. I had laughed. Do I even need to read it? It's just board minutes, he assured me, kissing my temple. I signed. I remember wiping tomato sauce off the corner of the page. Now I realized I'd handed the company over. I dug deeper. Passwords I hadn't touched in years led me to folders I forgot existed. The deeper I searched, the darker the rabbit hole became. I found email threads between Nathan and our accountant discussing strategic repositioning, spreadsheets full of doctored numbers, drafts of a narrative they were building, that I had mismanaged funds, that I was emotionally unstable, that my decisions were erratic. It was a setup, a slow, deliberate dismantling of everything I'd built, disguised as partnership, masked by pillow talk and Sunday brunches with the in-laws. I installed voice recorders in the guest room and kitchen. I started walking slower when I knew someone was behind me, just enough to let them talk. One evening, Evelyn and Claire visited without notice. Nathan wasn't home. They sat in the living room, sipping herbal tea like they belonged there more than I did. I stayed in the office with the door cracked. I didn't have to wait long. "She still doesn't know," Claire said. "She signed everything," Evelyn replied. "She thinks it's all just paperwork. Honestly, I'm surprised it took this long." "And the financials? Nathan's cleaning them up. He's got a guy. Once that narrative is solid, she's gone quietly." There was a pause. Then Evelyn's voice again, lower now. "She's smart, but she's not ruthless. That's her weakness." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even walk into the room to confront them. I just stared at the blinking red light on the recorder and realized with full clarity that I was never their daughter-in-law. I was a placeholder, a producer of value, and now that I had served my function, I was being retired, but they had underestimated one thing. I may not be ruthless, but I am strategic, and I was done playing nice. The day I left, I wore beige, not because I wanted to fade into the background, but because I knew they'd interpret it as surrender. Beige meant I was soft, defeated, ready to walk away without a fight. Nathan watched me pack my final bag with the same smug detachment you'd reserve for someone too broken to be a threat. He hugged me at the door, performative to the end, and whispered, "I hope you find peace." I smiled back. "I already have." The house that had once echoed with the sound of our laughter now stood silent. Even the floorboards beneath my heels felt foreign. I paused by the front gate, gave one last look at the manicured lawn Evelyn had insisted on upgrading, and stepped into the car waiting at the curb. Jason, the private investigator I'd hired weeks ago, tipped his head in greeting. "You ready to hit back?" "Not yet," I said. "First, I let them think they've won." We drove to a quiet condo on the other side of the city, leased under a shell company I'd created 6 months ago. Inside, everything was set. Burner phones, a dedicated laptop, encrypted servers. I had no interest in chaos. I wanted precision. Over the next few days, I sifted through the evidence Jason had collected. Financial transfers from company accounts to an LLC owned by Evelyn. Invoices for consulting services that never existed. Deleted emails Jason recovered from a cloud backup Nathan had foolishly thought he'd wiped clean. But one folder stopped me cold. "Wait," I said. "These dates? This is wrong." Jason leaned over my shoulder. "No, it's not. That's a scan of the original transfer document, dated 2 months before your wedding." My heart stalled. Nathan hadn't just stolen the company. He'd planned to from the very beginning. Before we exchanged vows, before we merged accounts, before I had even introduced him to my developers. That entire time, he was laying the groundwork to make me disposable. I pushed away from the table, suddenly dizzy. He never loved me. He invested in me. And when he believed the return on investment was complete, he cashed out. But he didn't realize I never put all my chips on one table. Back when the company was gaining traction and Nathan had suggested we consolidate, I agreed, but only on paper. What I never told him was that the core algorithm powering our product recommendations wasn't stored on the company's server. It was on mine, encrypted, locked behind 3 layers of biometric access, untouchable. While Nathan was busy staging his quiet coup, I had quietly filed patents under a different entity. I'd formed a parallel corporation, Varel Labs, staffed by freelancers and contractors bound by NDAs. The logo was different, the packaging sleeker, but the heart of it, the tech, the formulas, the soul of the brand, was the same, and it was mine. My attorney, Delia, a friend from business school, had been safeguarding the paperwork all along. She operated from a city 3 states away and never communicated, using channels that could be traced. We met over video call that night. "I've reviewed the files Jason sent," she said. "They're damning. They'll deny everything. They won't get the chance. You ready for the next move?" I exhaled slowly, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. "Let's set the clock." First, I gathered every piece of falsified data Nathan and Evelyn had cooked up. Then I compared it against internal memos, showing knowledge of the deception. Emails, voicemails, even a poorly erased text thread where Nathan joked about accidentally forgetting to inform me of a board meeting. Each file was tagged, organized, and packaged into a bomb. At 3 a.m., I sent it to the company's board of directors. At 3:01, I sent it to 3 journalists who specialized in corporate fraud. At 3:02, I sat back and waited. By morning, my name was trending. Samantha Caldwell, from CEO to scapegoat, the inside story. Whistleblower exposes family scheme to hijack skincare empire. Exclusive, Caldwell legacy, not what it seems. But I wasn't interested in headlines. I was interested in consequence. Within hours, Evelyn was locked out of the corporate accounts. Nathan's name disappeared from the company website. The board issued a statement calling for an emergency internal review. And me? I watched from my condo, still dressed in beige, sipping tea while the world I used to belong to burned. I didn't smile this time. Not yet. Because this was only the beginning. I hadn't seen Nathan in person since the day I left. The silence between us had grown so thick that even our lawyers communicated like diplomats from warring nations. So when I received a message from him asking to meet in peace, I almost laughed, but I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant off the highway, a place too upscale for gossip, too discreet for cameras. He was already seated when I arrived, wearing the same navy blazer he used to wear to investor meetings, the same one he wore on our honeymoon. "I miss you," he said before I'd even sat down. "I bet you do," I replied, signaling the waiter for water. He launched into a monologue I had rehearsed in my head a dozen times. Regret, misunderstanding, pressure from his mother, the board, even the weather if he thought it could absolve him. I nodded at all the right moments, eyes wide, lips pursed just enough to mimic uncertainty. In my bag, beneath a silk scarf, the recorder hummed softly. He reached for my hand. "You know I made mistakes, but I want to fix this. Together." "How?" I asked, gently pulling my hand back. "There's a vacancy for interim CEO. Claire nominated Marissa, but the board's hesitant. They'd listen if I pushed for you." "Marissa?" "Of course. His trusted advisor. The one with the perfect teeth and an MBA from somewhere that charged tuition by the syllable. I had suspected, but I needed confirmation." "You think they'll believe I'm stable enough?" I asked. "I've already started cleaning up the narrative," he said, sipping his wine. "And between us, Marissa and I, what we had was a mistake. It ended months ago." There it was, confirmation. I let him talk himself into a circle, each confession another stone in his own grave. When dessert came, I excused myself to the restroom. I didn't come back. 3 hours later, the audio file went live under a private handle. Title: When the real CEO disappears, the fake one reveals herself. Within minutes, shares of our former company dropped. Marissa deleted her social profiles. Claire issued a half-hearted denial. And Nathan, he called me 8 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer. But they weren't the only ones watching. 3 days later, I received a cease and desist letter. It accused me of defamation, breach of contract, and willful sabotage. It was signed by the family's legal team and filed in 3 jurisdictions. Jason, my investigator, called me right after. "They're going nuclear," he said. "And that's not all. Our server's down. Your new company's backend is offline." I refreshed the dashboard on my laptop. Nothing loaded, payment systems frozen, inventory systems inaccessible. I couldn't even send an internal email. A hacker, of course. The timing was too precise. The attacks too clean. Not some random cyber criminal, someone hired, someone expensive. Delia confirmed it the next day. "They're claiming you used insider knowledge to duplicate company assets. They're saying you're a fraud." "They're the ones who stole from me." "Doesn't matter," she replied. "They struck first. The media's running with their story." Headlines popped up like weeds. Samantha Caldwell, genius or grifter? From CEO to copycat, the fall of a skincare star. Exclusive, inside the double life of Samantha Caldwell. My inbox flooded with termination notices from retailers, partnerships, even vendors I'd built relationships with for years. One of them sent flowers, another sent condolences. None of them asked for my side. The worst came when my bank froze all my accounts, citing ongoing investigations. My phone rang with unknown numbers and blocked IDs. Some asked questions. Others made threats. Someone left a dead rose on my doorstep. I had expected retaliation, but not this fast, not this coordinated. For the first time since I started fighting back, I felt it. Real fear. Not for my reputation or my money, but for the idea that maybe, just maybe, I had underestimated them. That maybe the fire I thought I was controlling had leapt the barrier and now raged out of my hands. I stood by the window of my condo, watching the city lights blur through the tears I didn't realize had formed. They had taken my name, my brand, my stability, but they hadn't taken everything. Not yet, and not forever. When they shut me out, I let them think it worked. I didn't fight back right away. I didn't call the banks, didn't issue a statement, didn't scream into the void like they hoped I would. I went quiet. And in that silence, I did the most dangerous thing a woman like me can do. I prepared. 6 months before I walked out of that house, I'd started building a failsafe, a full digital replica of every system, file, contract, and design blueprint, backed up on a secure offline server stored in a cold facility under a dummy account in Denver. I called it Protocol Phoenix, my personal restart button. Jason and I drove to the site at midnight, cut through a January frost to unlock the data vault ourselves. As he plugged in the hardline, I stared at the blinking lights, the quiet rhythm of resurrection. "All of it's here," he said. "Everything they buried." "Then we bring it back to life," I whispered. I called my old team, people Nathan had let go during his streamlining phase. Developers, chemists, designers, the ones who actually built the company's foundation. People who'd been discarded because they were inconvenient, too outspoken, too loyal to me. They came back. Not for money, not for glory, but for justice. We rebuilt Varel Labs in a week. No fanfare, no press, just code, calls, and caffeine. By day 7, we had a fully functioning site, an internal product line, and a direct-to-consumer channel that bypassed every gate Nathan had once controlled. Then came the real blow. Jason uncovered a video. It was grainy, clearly recorded on a hidden camera in a country club lounge. Evelyn was speaking to a man in a navy pinstripe suit, her financial broker. She leaned in, voice sharp as a blade. "She's gone. Useless now. We divide the shares, then clean house." The man asked something inaudible. She laughed. "Toss her out and cut the check. She served her purpose." The video went live at 6 a.m. Eastern. By noon, it had 2 million views. People didn't just watch it. They raged. Every comment, every repost, every stitched reaction poured acid on the carefully polished image of the Caldwell family. It wasn't just a betrayal of a daughter-in-law. It was a blueprint of corporate misogyny, class elitism, and entitlement. The fallout was immediate. A local news outlet picked it up, then a national one, then a financial watchdog group. By nightfall, the Internal Revenue Service had issued a formal announcement. Caldwell Enterprises was under audit. But I wasn't done. Delia and I had been sitting on something for weeks, a dossier of internal financial manipulations spanning 5 years, hidden shell companies, falsified tax reports, and fake invoices routed through Claire's marketing firm. We packaged it neatly and delivered it to an independent journalism collective known for blowing up corporate corruption. They ran a 3-part exposé titled, "The Real Face of Family Business." Stockholders panicked. Sponsors pulled funding. Employees demanded resignations. In the chaos, I made my move. Through a third-party holding firm, legally separate, trace-proof, I began buying back shares, quietly, strategically, not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to gain leverage. And then I struck. A leaked email from the board revealed Nathan and Claire had offered Marissa a buyout package after her PR implosion. Desperate to stabilize the company, they were blind to the buyer's identity. I bought her stake, then Claire's, then a silent partner Nathan had never met in person. By the end of the week, I owned 62%. Delia stood beside me in the boardroom on the day I walked back in. Same blazer, same heels, different eyes. Nathan looked like a man watching a ghost. "I don't understand," he said, voice cracking. "You will," I replied, dropping the final signed document on the table. The company was mine, not in theory, not in memory, in ink, in law, in public record. I didn't fire them immediately. I gave them an hour, enough time to pack, to delete what they thought was damning, to scramble for dignity. Then security escorted them out, one by one. I changed the company name that same day, rebranded every label, rewrote every press release. Betrayal Labs was no longer a backup. It was the new flagship. And me? I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't smile for photos. I sat in my office, my real office now, and watched the names of the former board members disappear from the directory like smoke. The final step came that night. Delia poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. "To resurrection," she said. "No," I replied. "To reinvention." Because I hadn't just come back. I had become something else entirely. In the weeks after I reclaimed the company, I became everything they said I couldn't be. Headlines shifted from scandal to triumph. The Phoenix CEO, Caldwell no more, Samantha's empire rises. News outlets that once painted me as a fraud now clamored for interviews. Morning shows, business magazines, keynote stages. They all wanted a piece of my resurrection. And I gave it to them, strategically, carefully, without blinking. For a while, I believed the victory had cured me. That justice, delivered publicly and precisely, could replace what had been broken. But power, once seized, doesn't fill the cracks. It expands them. Inside the company, things began to shift. People walked softer around me. Meetings that used to feel collaborative now felt like interrogations, with everyone afraid of saying the wrong thing. One by one, the loyal few I'd rebuilt Betrayal Labs with began to pull away. Emma, my product lead, asked for a 6-month sabbatical. Ben from R&D turned in his resignation without explanation. The new hires treated me like a monarch, not a mentor. And I understood. They weren't afraid of failure. They were afraid of me. I started rereading emails twice before sending them, cutting any phrasing that might sound cold. I dropped into departments just to say hi, trying to be the woman I used to be, but it didn't work. You can't unring a bell, and I had rung mine loudly. Then came the article. Published anonymously on a small business blog, it went viral overnight. "She used to fight for us," it began. "Now she watches from a throne made of names she burned." The author didn't name me directly, but everyone knew. They referenced team meetings, specific phrases only insiders would recognize. The final line cut deeper than I expected. Samantha Caldwell didn't become a villain. She just stopped pretending she wasn't one. I closed my laptop and stared at the dark screen. Had I really changed that much? Or had I just stopped apologizing? The question stayed with me as I poured another glass of wine, sitting alone in my high-rise office, bathed in the glow of my own empire. The answer came 3 days later in a sleek, white envelope slid under my office door. No name, no return address, just a printed letter. It offered me an exit, a full buyout well above market value for all remaining shares, IP, and future control of Betrayal Labs. An offer too generous to ignore, too calculated to trust. At the bottom, typed in clean serif font, was the name of the holding firm making the offer, Hargrave Equity Consortium. I knew the name. It belonged to George Hargrave, Nathan's father, the man who had allegedly distanced himself from all of this, the one person I never considered a threat, because I thought he'd stayed out of it. Delia confirmed it within hours. Hargrave had been slowly buying up assets, pieces of Caldwell Enterprises, side deals tied to Marissa's exit package, remnants of Claire's contracts. He hadn't picked sides. He had picked his moment, and he wanted mine. Later that evening, I met with Delia in my apartment. She looked grim. "There's more," she said, handing me a second envelope, this one thicker. Inside was a series of private investigator reports, photos, names, emails. At the center of it all, a young woman named Talia Spencer, 24, fresh graduate, newly hired as an executive assistant in one of Hargrave's firms, and Nathan's daughter, not mine, not ours, his, with Marissa. The girl had been born 6 months after our wedding. She was the one who had hand-delivered the offer, and she wasn't just delivering a letter. She was delivering a message. This wasn't about justice anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. This was legacy warfare. I stared at her photo, her eyes so much like Nathan's, and felt something crack open inside me. Not rage, not sadness, fatigue, deep, soul-level fatigue. They wanted me gone, out, done. But the part they didn't understand, the part they never would, is that I wasn't just fighting for a company anymore. I was fighting to remember who I was before any of this started, before Nathan, before Evelyn, before I ever learned how to weaponize silence. And I wasn't ready to disappear just yet. I didn't hold a press conference. There were no headlines, no exclusive interviews. One morning, quietly and without ceremony, I submitted the paperwork to resign as CEO of Varel Labs. I declined all future speaking engagements, returned every industry award, and deleted the social media accounts that once served as my digital armor. The world had celebrated my rise, dissected my fall, and now they would be denied my final act. I didn't vanish. I reappeared elsewhere. A small brownstone building on a quiet street in Portland became home to something I never thought I'd create. A place for women like me, not entrepreneurs, not executives. Women betrayed, undermined. Women who gave everything and were handed silence in return. We called it the Catalyst Institute. It wasn't glamorous, no television crews, no venture capital, just folding chairs, whiteboards, and stories told in broken voices. I didn't teach them how to make money. I taught them how to take it back. And in those rooms, among strangers, I began to rebuild the parts of myself I didn't even know were missing. Then, one afternoon, as I was sorting old mail that had been forwarded from my previous office, I found an envelope, cream-colored. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly. It was a handwritten letter from Evelyn. "I used to be you," it read. "Once, smart, ambitious, hungry, but I gave it up. I let the fear win. I married safe. I obeyed. And then I taught my children to do the same. I became what I feared most, someone who crushed others just to feel less crushed herself." There was no apology, but there was honesty, and that, oddly enough, was more valuable. I placed the letter in the drawer of my desk and left it there. Not as proof of anything, but as a reminder. We all break differently. Months passed. The Institute grew. Women came from across the country. Some stayed for weeks, others just for a night. We shared coffee, strategy, laughter, tears. I never asked about their pasts. They never asked about mine. But one day, a woman approached me after a seminar. She looked no older than 30. "Is it true," she asked, "that you once lost everything?" I smiled. I didn't lose anything. I just stopped clinging to what wasn't mine. The phrase stayed with me, so much so that I made it the title of my memoir. I didn't lose anything. The book wasn't a bestseller, but it found its readers. Messages poured in, emails, letters, DMs. Women thanking me not for revenge, but for permission. Permission to walk away, to rebuild, to stop apologizing. I wasn't famous anymore. I was something rarer, understood. Eventually, the speaking invitations came back, not from TV studios or business expos, but from libraries, nonprofits, college classrooms. And one day, an email from TEDx landed in my inbox. Would you be willing to share your story? I hesitated, not because I didn't have anything left to say, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Still, I said yes. The stage was small. The lights warm. I wore no makeup. No stylist had touched my hair. The room was filled with people I didn't know, and that made it easier. I stepped up to the mic, paused, and looked out. You've probably heard the story before? I began. Woman builds empire, man betrays her, woman fights back, wins. End of story, right? Laughter, nods. But what if I told you? That wasn't the point. Silence. I was betrayed. I was discredited. I was erased. And for a long time, I thought the answer was to fight, louder and harder, to reclaim everything they took. I paused. But then I realized revenge is just a delayed form of obedience. You're still letting them define your next move. I let that sink in. If you've ever been betrayed, don't rush to retaliate. Don't waste your energy trying to prove you're worthy of what was stolen. I stepped closer. Make them learn your name through the one thing they can't destroy, your impact. The room went quiet. Then applause. I stepped off the stage and into a different version of myself. Not a wife, not a warrior, not a brand, just a woman who broke the rules, then rewrote them.